Happy Thursday. Welcome to Lunchtime Live. I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and this is episode 71. It is our last episode of 2021. Very exciting. So I don't know where this year went. Oh my goodness, it feels like it was just January, but then it also feels like it's been 10 years. So I'm all over the place. But anyway, let's get into it. So for those of you who are new here, Lunchtime Live is basically my video newsletter for Stitches and Scraps. And then I end every session with a quick demo on a knitting or crochet technique or something adjacent. Today I'm going to show you how to fix your knitting mistakes, or by dropping down stitches, or what to do if you actually drop a stitch accidentally and how you can pick it back up. So that's going to be the demo at the end. So if you want to see any of the things that I talk about in the video, so like if I talk about a blog post or a pattern, and you want the link for that, in the description on the video there's a link to a blog post. And in that post I've listed everything I plan to talk about today. So today there's actually not much in the way of links, but anytime for the Lunchtime Lives, you can click that link in the description and it will take you to all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about. So let's get into it. Well, the only thing new on the blog this week is I posted a best of 2021, kind of a year in review recap thing. So it's the top 20 patterns and tutorials out of everything I've posted this year. And I also went through kind of, here's the events that we did this year with the different crochet alongs and knit alongs and all that kind of stuff. And here's some idea of what's coming up for next year. So the stuff that I'm working on and the stuff I've already released, everything like that for next year. The biggest one obviously right now is the bag along crochet along. It seems funny to say it that way. It's the bag along cow, but it's basically a crochet along with bags that's going to go through the year. So be sure to check that out. I do have the intro post for that already up. I'm going to be posting the first giveaway and materials list for the first pattern next week. And also next week I have a blanket square pattern coming out, and that's for another crochet along as well. So that's everything that's coming up and new on the blog. We do have a longer demo today, so I'm gonna just get right into it if there's no questions. Oh, and I had asked you guys last week what you thought of changing my format from doing just keeping on adding numbers, like episode 71, 72, 73, going forward, or whether I should start doing seasons and dividing it up that way. I've decided it's easier to just keep adding numbers. So next episode will be episode 72, and eventually maybe we'll have 1,000 episodes, who knows. But yeah, so we should hit episode 100 sometime next year. But that's something to look forward to. Anyway, okay, so let's jump right into the demo portion today. It's going to be a slightly longer one because I want to show you a lot of different things that can go on with this. So this is just a little swatch I worked up. And the pattern here, and this is important because we're going to be rebuilding it as we drop it down, I've got 5 stitches. I got an edge stitch that I'm knitting every stitch, and then 4 stitches that are just stockinette. Okay, and down here I have some garter, which will come into play later. And then here in these 5 stitches, what I've done is I've done a knit 2 together, a yarn over, a regular knit stitch, a make 1 left, so that's an increase where I picked it up, and then a slip slip knit decrease. So it's decrease, increase, regular, increase, decrease, and then more straight stitches here. So let's start with the basic one. Suppose I had a mistake here, okay? Suppose I had an error there or here, and I wanted to drop my stitch down, or suppose I accidentally dropped my stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the stitch I want to drop, which is, let's do this one, the 4th stitch, okay? And I'm just going to keep these stitches off to the side on this needle. And I'm going to come over here and intentionally drop this stitch. Now, there it is. There we go. Okay, so here's my needle, and this is going to help me very carefully drop the stitch. Now, of course, if you've done it by accident, you're just going to have a run here, and you'll just want to pick up the stitch as soon as you can find it. But let's see, let's say this dropped all the way down. I'm going to go pretty low to here. Now, if you're intentionally dropping it to fix a mistake, you're going to want to drop it to below the mistake to where it's correct, right? So let's say we dropped it to there. Now, the first thing you want to do always, if you've got a drop stitch or any sort of live loop like that, is you want to secure your loop. You can use a needle, you can use a stitch marker, but get your loop secured so it's not going to drop any further. And then let's look at what we have here. So you can see this laddering. Now for straight, knit and purl stitches, you shouldn't see any twisting in this. It should be a very clear ladder. And what we're going to do is we're going to ladder back up. Now you can use a crochet hook or you can use a knitting needle, whatever's easier for you. I like the crochet hook. And I want to make, this is stockinette, so I want to make all knit stitches. A knit stitch is basically pulling this next loop from the ladder through the current stitch from back to front. And see, that made a knit stitch. So then I go back here, I grab the next loop in the ladder, and I pull it through from back to front, and that made another knit stitch. And I would keep going all the way up like that. So that's very easy if you just have stockinette and you're just doing knit stitches. Now let's look at, if we got down here into the garter stitch section, what it would look like down there. Or, if you have ribbing, if you have anything where you might, or not ribbing, seed stitch, anything where you might have different stitches, right? Now I want you to watch this. This is the last one that looks like a knit stitch. And watch when it comes out. It's coming out, it's not coming out, there we go. It's coming out from the front to the back. So you can see the yarn was pulled through from the back to the front, right? Now if we look at this one, watch this. It's coming out the other way. You can see the yarn went in from the front through the back. Now here's another knit stitch, which is going to come out that way, okay, in the back. So you can see where for purl you move the yarn to the front, you can see where the yarn is actually sitting at the front. Okay, so suppose we've dropped down to here. Now it's a little bit less clear, right? Let's open up our ladder again, and you can see this rung of the ladder is actually a little bit looser than the others, and that was the purl one. But you can see here where we have still that laddering effect, even though it's knits and purls. This one's sitting in front because it was a purl. So we're still going to do this the same way. You just have to be careful about whether you're doing a knit or a purl. So stretch this out and look at where the very first rung on your ladder is, and you can pull on it slightly to see where it goes. It goes into that stitch, right? So you know that's the first one, and you know that we've got to knit. All right, now the next stitch, it's going into here. So that's the second one, and we've got to purl. So we bring our yarn in front. I'm going to take my hook out and put it in the other way, okay? And now to purl, we're going to bring it from front to back through the stitch. Now my next one's a knit, so I just twisted my hook so that I can go the other way. Now you might think it was that one, right? Always pull your fabric apart till you can see that it's actually this one that was hiding underneath. And this time I'm just going to go quickly, and because now it's all stockinette, I'm just going to go quickly and work all the way up, and you can see how it looks at the end. The key is to watch your tension. You want to use a hook that's similar in size to your needles, or you can do it with needles, which like a separate set of needles makes it easiest. Just knit the stitch and then put it back on the needles, but basically you're going to pull this loop through, and you'll see more with the needles when I do more complicated stuff. Pull that ladder through, pull the ladder through. And notice this finger, I'm putting pressure on the stitches around it so that I'm not accidentally tugging on those stitches when I pull this through. So I'm kind of evening out the pressure as I go with this finger and this finger to kind of hold the stitches around it. Okay, now I'm done, and I'm going to put that back on the needle and zhuzh my stitches back on. And it's back to perfect. You can't even tell where we dropped the stitch, right? So the tension is key. If you've pulled it very tight, you're going to be able to tell. But this was the stitch we dropped, and then we picked it all the way back up. And you can see here how the garter stitch looks the same too. So that's great for knits and purls. But what are we going to do when we get into increases and decreases? Well, let's take a look. Let's start with the first one here. This is a slip-slip knit, right? So you can see this column of slip-slip knits. Now watch what happens when I take this, just this one stitch out, okay? The first row, I was doing slip-slip knit on the right side and then purl on the wrong side, right? So the first row is just that purl on the wrong side, which looks like a knit, okay? But now look what's happening. This loop is coming out of 2 stitches. Do you see that? 2 stitches. And I want to show you something in the yarn over. So let me secure that for a minute. I want to make sure you can see. Do you see how in the yarn over the yarn is twisting around? That makes it much harder to see which loop is actually the next loop. So what's going to happen when we start ripping this out is you're going to start getting extra stitches because this is a decrease, right? So you have the stitches that you decreased. So when I rip this out, now I have 2 stitches, okay? And this stitch will stay here. And if I rip out another one, this one's just the knit on the, the purl on the wrong side. If I rip out another one, now I've got another 2 stitches. Okay, so now I've got the stitch I was working on plus this other stitch that was decreased into it. So you end up starting to get a lot of stitches that you have to hold on to. You can do it this way. Let me do just one, and here's where stitch markers start to get really handy. Okay, so this is one stitch I want to hold on to from the second row. Okay, and this is where I'm at right now. So the way that I would actually do this is with my needles. I tend to prefer this with my needles. I'm going to first of all put these on the needle so that they're nice and secure. Okay. Now I'm going to find the next thread. So I'm looking at the one that came from the stitch before, and that is this thread right here. Right? You see that? So I'm going to hold on to that thread, ignore everything else, and do my slip-slip knit with this thread as my working yarn. So for a slip-slip knit, I slip, I put the needle back in, and now this thread is my working yarn, okay? This one that's coming off of that previous stitch. So when I put my needle back in, I'm going to scoop this thread through, and that made my slip-slip knit, okay? Now, oh, sorry, did I do that wrong? No, that was correct. That was a, yes, that's correct. That was a slip-slip knit. So now the next stitch is going to be the regular like purl on the wrong side, so knit on the right side. So I can do this with my needles instead of picking up my hook. This is the next thread, right? So I'm going to hold on to that thread. I'm going to insert my needle to knit, okay? And then I'm going to pull this thread through. Okay, so that's the same thing we did scooping through with the crochet hook, I just did it with the needle. Now in the next row, I've got to do that decrease again, right? Well, here's my next stitch sitting here that I put on the stitch marker. Sorry, the word left my head. So I'm going to put these 2 that I need to work back onto my left needle. Okay, make sure they're oriented correctly. I'm going to find my next yarn for my next working row, and okay, are you guys seeing me now? Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but anyway, so I'll be showing that to you again, so don't worry about that. But now we're back up to the top here, and I've got one more right here. Okay, remember, I'm looking for what came out of the previous stitch. I don't care about what's over here because it's twisty because of that yarn over. So I'm not going to look at that. I'm going to look at what came out of the previous stitch, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to knit with it. So I insert my needle, it gets fiddly, right? I insert my needle, I grab this yarn at the back and I knit with it. Okay, now that stitch is the last knit stitch. Put it back here, we can look at it. Notice my tension's a little more wonky here, okay? These decreases are a little bit harder to keep an even tension with, but you can move your yarns around here and pull on them, you know, pull on your yarn overs and kind of get the tension back to where it should be. What I tend to do, if I'm dealing with something like this where I have a decrease and an increase next to each other, and I've actually got two columns of stitches that are pretty involved with each other, right? What I will actually do is I will drop both of those columns because I find it easier to work back up through both columns because my yarn at the back then is straight. It's not all twisty. It's not, you know, the tension is easier because I'm not messing with the increase and decrease arrangement. So let's start here, okay? I've got these two, so obviously my next row has to be a decrease, right? So I'm going to do the decrease and then a yarn over. And this is the first thread. You can see it's the first thread that comes out of the stitch before it. So I'm going to take this thread and hold the rest away so that I know I'm not doing them with that. And I'm going to do my decrease. So slip, slip, knit. Okay. And when I knit, I'm going to knit with this thread back here. All right, now if you prefer the crochet hook, you can do that with the crochet hook, so I'll show you that next time. But let's put this stitch back on my left needle so I can examine my loops here, okay? Oh, sorry, I didn't finish. I did two stitches, right? There's the decrease and then there's the yarn over. So I have to actually do that yarn over as well. So I pick up, that's it, just pick up that loop to do the yarn over. So put both of these stitches back on my left needle and let's find our next thread. It looks like this one is our next thread coming out of the next stitch, right? So move all of the rest of these to the back, grab this thread, and this time I'm going to show it to you. This time I'm going to show it to you with the crochet hook. So the first thing is a slip, slip, knit, right? Instead of using your needle, just use the crochet hook to do the same motion. Oh, sorry, this row is just knitting. So let's just pull these through. Okay, there's one, and there's two, and then we're going to put them back on the needle. The next row is the decrease row again. So there is my next yarn. Do you see it right there? And I'm going to grab that, set all the other ones behind. Okay, I don't know what's going on. I think it's my internet. It keeps wanting to disconnect on me. Can you guys see me now? All right. Hopefully you can see me now. But, so I was about to slip, slip, knit, right? So I'm going to slip, slip, knit with my crochet hook. So I slip, I insert this needle back in, okay, which I actually don't really need to do because, you know, I've got this held pretty well, but I can do it for the sake of consistency, right? I grab this yarn that I'm holding with my finger and I pull it through. And that is a slip, slip, knit. Then remember, I've got to do a yarn over, okay? Put those back on to this needle and grab the next yarn that's coming out, which is, that's that yarn. Okay, the next yarn is this one. And now I'm on basically what would be a wrong side row, so I would be purling on the wrong side, and so I'm just going to knit on this side. So insert my hook, pull it through, insert my hook. Whoop. This is why you have to hold that yarn with your finger. There we go. Insert my hook and pull it through. Now usually I'm not going to use a crochet hook when I'm doing something more complicated like this, or if my crochet hook is across the room and I have to get up to get it, I'm just going to use the needle. So let's find the next one and I'll show you another different way to do it. Okay, so, and this is the way I often end up doing it, but it's a little less clear what you're doing. Hi, Beth. Oh, good. I'm glad you're back. Okay, so I'm going to do my slip slip, right? For the slip slip knit. And what I would normally do is I'd put this back on my needle in the direction as though I'm knitting it, right? And then I take this loop that I want to knit into it, and I just put it on my needle and pull these up over. So that's another way to do it. It's a little less clear what you're doing, but it's a little less fiddly to work with. So that's another way you can do it. And then you've got to find this thread again, there it is, and do your yarn over. Okay, put these back, always put them back on the left needle or on your, non-working needle. Find the next thread. There we go. Find the next thread and then scoop it through, or put the next thread over the needle and pull the stitch up and off over it. Those are two different ways you can do that with the same results. So sometimes I do one, sometimes I do the other. Make sure your stitches are back facing the correct direction, and there you go. We have now fixed that column. Okay? You can do, the way I did 2 stitches right there, you can do a whole series. You could drop down all 5 of these stitches and re-knit every row one by one. You just basically use the key is you use your thread that's back here, your ladder thread, right, as your working yarn, and then re-knit the stitches that you were knitting. So you do that and try to maintain the tension, and that's all there is to it. Now I've been doing this whole time, I've been showing you that you look at the stitch before to see which yarn it is that you've got to pull through, right? But remember that your yarn overs are all twisty in here. That's just the nature of yarn overs. See how the stitch that comes up through the yarn over makes it basically twist, right? So that's what it looks like when you purl on the wrong side through a yarn over. So if I was to do these stitches, it would be really hard to tell which stitch I'm supposed to be picking up. So suppose I dropped these stitches. Now I've got all this twisting going on here. Which stitch am I supposed to be picking up, right? Well, now I know that this is more of a stable direction to look at. So I'm going to look at that side when I determine. And if I can't tell on either side, if I had yarn overs on both sides, I would drop enough stitches until I could tell the order of the stitches. So this is my next yarn here, okay, right there. So I'm going to pick up that stitch and knit over that yarn, okay. Then my next one is here, so I pick that up and knit over it. Okay, put this on here, pick up that last one and knit over it. So the key is finding the right yarn, and you have to look at the nearby stitches to do it, and then also maintaining your tension nice and even as you do that work. Okay, you don't want to drop down too much, especially in lace, because tension is difficult to maintain, but when you block, that should take out some of these little tension wobbles that I've got here. And then this, of course, I was going to show you how to do the make ones as well. I'm just going to drop down to the first level because I think you guys get the idea here. So this is just the wrong side, just knitting. Now here I've got a make one left, and that is where you pick up that bar, right? You pick up that bar and you knit through it to make a stitch, and then this is a decrease here. So again, you're just going to work these stitches as though you were working that row, but you're going to use, come on, I'm splitting the yarn, there we go. You're going to use this as your working yarn. So I put these 2 stitches, make sure they're oriented correctly, back onto the left needle, grab my working yarn here, okay, and I'm starting with a make one left. So a make one left is, I always forget these and I have to look them up. think this is the make one left. Yes, you pick it up from front to back. Yeah, you pick it up from front to back, and then you knit through the back loop. So I picked it up from front to back, and now I've got to knit through the back loop. So I insert my needle through the back loop. This is my working yarn, and I'm going to scoop it through. Really, I am. Okay, insert through the back loop, scoop that working yarn through, and that is my make one left. Okay, now this is still my working yarn, and I have to do a knit two together. So I'm going to insert my needle into these two, do the yarn over with the working yarn, and pull it through to knit these two together. Okay, and there is my make one left and my knit two together. Now for the next row, it's just knits. So knit, okay, and there's my ladder yarn there, and knit. Put them back on my needle, and we're back to where we started. There's my make one, and there is my decrease. So it's really about two things. It's about maintaining your tension, and it's about really watching which direction the yarn is moving in the stitches nearby, so that you pick up the right ladder yarn, and then you just rework the stitches that you dropped. So let's talk about when you would do this, okay? Couple of things to consider, whether you want to do this or whether you want to rip out your work. If I was working on a scarf or a swatch that's this big, where it's only 15 stitches across, I'm probably going to just rip back my rows if it's, you know, a complicated stitch, because the tension just won't look good if I drop down too many rows, or if it's too complicated of a stitch. It's not going to look as good as if I rip it out and redo it, and it's not that many stitches, so I'll rip it out and redo it. But if it's simple, if it's just stockinette, I'm going to drop it down, because come on, stockinette takes 2 minutes to work back up. I'm not ripping out, you know, 10 or 12 rows when I could just do that one stitch going back up. If I'm working on a the edging of a shawl, for example, where I have 400 or 500 stitches, then you better believe I'm going to drop it down unless it's really complex lace, because I'm not ripping out 500 stitches to fix a tiny mistake. So basically I weigh how long it's going to take me to drop it down and how complicated it is, so you know how many tension issues I'm likely to have, versus how long it's going to take me to rip it out and reknit it. And that valuation changes the more practice you get at doing this. And I've had a lot of, I make a lot of mistakes, you guys. So I've had a lot of practice doing this. And so I'm more confident. I'll probably rip it down more often than not, just because it's easier, it takes less time, and I can usually fudge any tension errors in the blocking. And the other thing to think about too is you can always try dropping down first, and if you pull it back up and it doesn't look good, or you're having trouble recreating the pattern, then rip it out. You haven't lost anything by dropping it down other than a little bit of time. And that's the best way to practice. So that is how to fix mistakes by dropping down, or how to pick up dropped stitches. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? I know I kind of went through a lot there, and it was kind of just an overview of how to do it, but you get the general gist of finding the yarn that belongs in that row and then reworking your stitches with it. And you can do that with any stitch. You can do it with cables. I have yet to successfully do it with cables. My mind just doesn't like it. It gets all crossed in my head. But theoretically you can do it with cables. Everybody's got their weak spot. Some people don't like to do it with lace because the yarn overs really throw them. So it's really a personal preference thing. And if there are no other questions, or no questions at all, then I will just say Happy New Year. Have a good weekend. I hope you guys have a great time, whatever you're doing, And I will see you next year. Now, next year, I'm going to change the format for the demos. I'm making a list of knit stitches and crochet stitches, like stitch patterns, and I'm just going to do a different knit or crochet stitch pattern, and I'll alternate between knit and crochet throughout the year. So the first one, I believe, is going to be a knit stitch, and then we'll just go every week knit, crochet, knit, crochet, knit, crochet. Through the year, I'll teach you different stitches. So hopefully that'll be lots of fun, and I will see you next year. Bye.